Heal me for $1 million.
Heal me for $1 million. The billionaire laughed as the words left his mouth, sunlight glinting off the rim of his sunglasses while guests seated around the open-air sit-out smiled uncertainly, unsure whether to laugh with him or look away. The breeze carried the scent of grilled seafood and polished wood. Somewhere below, traffic hummed. Life moved normally. Too normally. Then the laugh stopped. It was not dramatic. It simply failed. Richard Robinson felt it before he understood it. A tightening. Not pain. Pressure. Like a wide band drawn slowly around his chest, not enough to crush, just enough to remind him it was there. His smile lingered a second longer than it should have, then slid away as if it had lost its reason to exist. No one noticed at first. Richard had spent decades perfecting the art of appearing unbothered. Meetings ran long. Flights delayed. Markets dipped. He smiled through all of it. His body learned to comply. Or so he believed. That was when the voice cut through the afternoon air. Your breathing is late. It did not belong to the table. It did not belong to the guests. It did not belong to the world Richard Robinson occupied. Conversation stalled mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates. A few heads turned slowly, confused more than alarmed. Near the edge of the sit-out, where warm stone tiles met trimmed hedges and open sky, stood a black boy no older than 9. Barefoot. Dust clinging to his ankles. Still in a way children rarely were. No one had seen him arrive. Richard lowered his glass carefully. His heart thudded once, hard, then settled back into rhythm, almost offended at the interruption. "Excuse me," he said, voice light, polished, dismissive. The tone that had ended negotiations and silenced rooms. The boy did not react to the tone. He did not look at Richard's face. His eyes were fixed on Richard's chest. "You are inhaling after you finish speaking," he said. "Not before." A ripple of nervous laughter spread across the table. Someone whispered that security should remove him. A guard shifted forward, then hesitated when Richard lifted a finger without looking away. Richard studied the boy now. Not irritated. Curious. "And what does that mean?" he asked. The boy tilted his head slightly, as if deciding how much truth the moment could hold. "It means you do not have time to argue." Behind them, glass railings reflected the midday sun, the city sprawling beyond in clean lines and quiet confidence. This was supposed to be a celebration. A luncheon. Investors. Friends. Applause disguised as conversation. Richard leaned back in his chair. $1 million, he said casually, as if commenting on the weather. "If you help me. If you cannot, you leave." The boy nodded. Not eagerly. Not nervously. As if money were a language he did not speak. That unsettled Richard more than the words themselves. Children usually stared at him. Asked questions. Wanted something. This one did not look at his watch, his shoes, or the people surrounding him. He looked past the performance. "You have about 30 seconds, the boy said. A murmur passed through the sit-out. Phones lifted slightly, then lowered again. No one wanted to be caught recording something that might turn embarrassing. Richard felt irritation flicker, brief and sharp, then fade. "You sound confident," Richard said. The boy shrugged. "I pay attention." Richard had built his life on attention. On noticing what others missed. He learned early that the world rewarded anticipation over reaction. As a child, he learned to stay quiet. Noise attracted trouble. Silence gathered information. Those instincts carried him into adulthood. Into boardrooms. Into rooms where powerful men talked too much and lost. Now, seated beneath an open sky, he felt something unfamiliar. Being observed. The boy took a step closer. The distance remained respectful. Safe. Still, Richard felt it, like someone leaning over his shoulder while he worked. "Sit forward," the boy said. "Not straight. Forward." Richard hesitated. A few guests laughed again, awkward this time. Someone muttered that this was absurd. The pressure in Richard's chest shifted. Subtle. Real. He leaned forward slightly. The sensation eased. Barely. Enough. Richard noticed. How do you know that? He asked. The boy did not answer. His eyes flicked briefly to Richard's left hand resting on the arm of the chair. The fingers trembled once. Stopped. The guard cleared his throat. Sir. Wait, Richard said. The word surprised even him. The boy inhaled slowly, deliberately, as if demonstrating something. You are good at hiding things, he said. But your body never learned. Something stirred beneath the pressure. Not fear. Not yet. Something older. A memory trying to surface before being pushed back down. How did you get in here? Richard asked. The boy glanced around the open space, the sunlight, the people. I walked, he said. Laughter followed. Louder. Relief laughter. Richard did not join in. His pulse sounded louder now, insistent. The boy shifted his weight, toes curling slightly against the warm stone. You should loosen your collar, he added. Richard lifted a hand halfway to his neck, then stopped himself. The boy noticed. A faint acknowledgement crossed his face. You have been feeling this for a while, the boy continued. Mostly when you sit. Mostly when you pretend you are fine. Richard's gaze hardened. You are guessing. The boy shook his head. I do not guess. Silence stretched. The breeze returned, stirring napkins, brushing leaves. A glass clinked somewhere behind them. Richard became aware of his breathing again. In. Out. Late. What do you want? Richard asked. The boy finally looked at his face. Really looked. For you to stop laughing, he said. It makes it worse. Something shifted. Quiet. Internal. The urge to laugh drained away completely. The pressure spiked, then steadied. Richard swallowed. No one spoke. Richard Robinson had faced hostile takeovers, lawsuits, and rooms full of men waiting for him to blink. None of it prepared him for a barefoot child standing in daylight, dismantling his composure without raising his voice. You said 30 seconds, Richard said. The boy nodded. You have used 12. Richard exhaled slowly. For the first time in years, he wondered if the life he had built had ignored something essential. Not success. Not power. Something smaller. Something quieter. What is your name? Richard asked. The boy hesitated, just a fraction. Harrison Underwood, he said. Richard nodded once, committing it to memory without knowing why. Go on, Harrison, Richard said. Harrison stepped closer again. And the city seemed to fade. Richard Robinson did not collapse. That was what unsettled everyone most. He remained standing, bent slightly forward just as Harrison Underwood instructed, breathing slower than instinct demanded. The pressure in his chest lingered like a threat that had decided to wait. Around them, the sit-out felt different now. The laughter had evaporated. Plates sat untouched. Conversations did not resume. People watched without pretending they were not. You feel it move, don't you? Harrison asked quietly. Richard nodded once. Talking felt unnecessary. The boy's calm carried more authority than the murmured opinions of executives who had advised him for years. Good, Harrison said. That means you're not ignoring it anymore. Richard straightened a little, then stopped when the pressure answered back. He adjusted again, slower this time. The sensation eased. He looked at the boy, really looked, and noticed what he had missed before. The way Harrison stood as if conserving energy. The way his eyes tracked movement without darting. Not fear. Not bravado. Efficiency. Who are you? Richard asked. Harrison did not answer immediately. He crouched and picked up a folded paper that had fallen near the hedge, smoothing it with his thumb. You should stay like that for a minute, he said instead. People rush when they think the danger passed. Richard almost smiled. Almost. The guards hovered closer now, unsure who they were protecting. A woman from the table whispered about liability. Someone else mentioned calling a doctor they knew. Richard raised a hand again, palm outward. This time, no one questioned it. He lowered himself into the chair carefully, leaning forward just enough. The pressure settled into a dull reminder. Not gone. Not growing. 30 seconds, Richard said. You said 30. Harrison nodded. That was to get your attention. And now? Richard asked. Now we buy time, Harrison said. The word landed heavier than expected. Time was something Richard had always assumed he could purchase. Extend. Replace. He watched Harrison tuck the folded paper into his pocket, then rest his hands loosely at his sides. You noticed my breathing, Richard said. Why? Because it lagged, Harrison replied. People think breathing is automatic. It isn't when something's wrong. You've seen this before, Richard said. Harrison's shoulders lifted slightly. Not a shrug. A calibration. Enough times. The answer unsettled Richard. He glanced around the sit-out, at the polished wood, the open sky, the skyline beyond. This was not a place where enough times should be possible. Where? Richard asked. Harrison looked at the stone beneath his feet. Public places, he said. Places people wait. Richard followed the implication without asking for clarification. Bus stops. Clinics. Lines. He felt the weight of the moment shift again, not in his chest this time, but behind his eyes. A guard cleared his throat. Sir, we really should. Give us a minute, Richard said, more firmly now. The guard hesitated, then stepped back. Harrison's gaze flicked up, meeting Richard's briefly. There was no triumph in it. Just confirmation. You keep your shoulders tight when you talk, Harrison said. It makes it worse. Richard obeyed without comment, letting them drop. The pressure answered, easing slightly. He exhaled slowly, then again. How did you learn this? Richard asked. Harrison considered the question. By paying attention when people didn't, he said. That's not an answer, Richard said. It is, Harrison replied. Just not a neat one. Richard leaned forward, elbows on knees, the posture now instinctive. He had spent years refining clean narratives. This did not feel like one. What do you want? Richard asked again, softer this time. Harrison met his eyes. For you to listen, he said. And not interrupt. Richard almost laughed. He stopped himself before it reached his mouth. All right, he said. Harrison nodded. Good. The city noise below rose and fell like distant surf. Somewhere, a phone vibrated, unanswered. The sit-out felt suspended, as if the afternoon had paused to watch. You've had this before, Harrison said. Not like this. Smaller. Quieter. Richard did not deny it. He remembered moments dismissed as stress. Flights where he shifted uncomfortably. Meetings where he felt a tightness he ignored. He had always chosen momentum. Why today? Richard asked. Harrison glanced at the sun, then back at Richard. You sat longer, he said. You laughed through it. That stung more than Richard expected. Laughter had been armor. He had worn it for decades. You don't know anything about me, Richard said. Harrison nodded. I know you don't stop. The boy took a step back, scanning Richard again, not with concern but with calculation. Lean a little more, he said. Yes. There. Richard adjusted. The pressure responded immediately, easing further. The reaction was undeniable now. A murmur rippled through the guests. Is he doing better? Someone whispered. Richard ignored them. You're not fixing me, he said to Harrison. You're managing me. Harrison nodded again. That's the point. The simplicity of it struck Richard. He had built companies on managing risk, on preventing collapse before it happened. He had ignored his own body with impressive consistency. Where did you get the idea to tell me to lean forward? Richard asked. Harrison's hand went to his pocket briefly, touching the folded paper. It's written down, he said. A lot. Written where? Places people wait, Harrison repeated. Richard felt the urge to press, to extract the story neatly. He resisted it. Listening felt different. An ambulance siren wailed faintly in the distance, then passed. Harrison's eyes tracked the sound, then returned to Richard. You're going to be okay for now, Harrison said. But you need to stop pretending this is nothing. Richard nodded slowly. And if I don't? Harrison met his gaze. Then next time, you won't be standing. The words were not dramatic. They did not need to be. Richard felt the truth of them settle. He looked around the sit-out again. At the people who had watched him laugh through danger. At the city that rewarded endurance and punished pause. Stay, Richard said suddenly. Harrison blinked. For what? For a minute, Richard said. Just, stay. Harrison hesitated. The sit-out felt like a boundary. Not physical. Social. Then he nodded and sat on the edge of the stone planter, careful not to touch the furniture. Richard noticed that too. What are you reading? Richard asked, nodding toward Harrison's pocket. Harrison considered. Things people throw away, he said. Richard's breath caught, not sharply, but enough to remind him the pressure had not vanished. He leaned forward again, breathing carefully. Do you always do this? Richard asked. Step in. Harrison's gaze drifted to the skyline. Not always, he said. Only when it's loud enough. Richard followed his line of sight. From here, the city looked calm. Orderly. He wondered how many warnings he had ignored because they did not announce themselves. The guests began to drift away now, conversations restarting in hushed tones. Someone touched Richard's shoulder, asking if he was all right. He nodded, eyes still on Harrison. What happens next? Richard asked. Harrison stood, brushing dust from his palms. You keep breathing like that, he said. And you don't forget this feeling. Richard watched him carefully. And you? Harrison looked back at him. I pay attention somewhere else. The boy turned toward the exit path, bare feet quiet on stone. Harrison, Richard said. Harrison stopped. Richard searched for the right words and found none that felt sufficient. Thank you, he said finally. Harrison nodded once. You're welcome. He took another step, then paused again. You should get checked, he added. Soon. I will, Richard said. Harrison did not respond. He walked away, unremarkable to anyone who did not know what he had just done. Richard remained seated, leaning forward, breathing deliberately, watching the city resume its rhythm. The pressure in his chest lingered, a reminder rather than a threat. For the first time in a long while, Richard Robinson did not rush to stand. And somewhere beyond the hedges and polished wood, a boy who paid attention disappeared back into a world that rarely did. Richard Robinson did not forget. That surprised him more than the episode itself. 3 days passed. Then 5. Then 7. And still, the memory of a barefoot boy standing in sunlight refused to fade into the background noise of his life. Not like everything else. Not like warnings he had learned to dismiss with discipline and distraction. He kept leaning forward without thinking. In meetings. In cars. At his desk. His breathing had changed too. Slower. Deliberate. As if some quiet internal metronome had been reset. The doctors confirmed what Harrison had hinted at without naming. A cardiovascular compression issue made worse by posture, stress, and prolonged sitting. Not dramatic enough to kill quickly. Dangerous enough to end suddenly if ignored. You were lucky, one specialist said. Richard did not correct him. Luck had nothing to do with it. He sat alone in his office afterward, the city stretching endlessly below the glass, and found himself staring at his reflection. He looked the same. Expensive suit. Calm expression. Controlled posture. But something fundamental had shifted. Someone had seen through him. And worse, someone with nothing had done it effortlessly. Richard's assistant knocked lightly. Sir, about the incident at the luncheon, security filed a report. Richard waved it away. Find the boy, he he said. She hesitated. We don't have a name. Richard did. Harrison Underwood, he said. About 9. Black. Barefoot. He walked in like he belonged. The assistant wrote it down, skepticism flickering across her face. That's very little to go on. Richard smiled thinly. Then expand the search. It took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of camera footage. 2 weeks of neighborhood canvassing. 2 weeks of Richard growing more restless than he had been in years. They found Harrison not in a school, not in a shelter, not in any database that mattered. They found him in a public library. Not inside. Outside. Sitting on the concrete steps, back against the brick wall, a stack of books beside him, reading as if the world had no claim on his attention. Richard watched from the car for a moment before stepping out. The boy looked exactly the same. Barefoot. Still. Focused. Harrison looked up before Richard reached him. You shouldn't stand straight like that, Harrison said calmly. Richard adjusted without thinking. That irritated him. Then it amused him. Hello, Harrison, Richard said. Harrison closed the book slowly. You remembered. Yes, Richard said. You didn't think I would. Harrison studied him, eyes narrowing slightly, not with suspicion, but evaluation. Most people forget once they feel better. I didn't feel better, Richard said. I felt warned. That earned him a nod. Richard gestured to the books. May I sit? Harrison shrugged. You're already doing it wrong. Richard lowered himself beside him carefully, leaning forward. The concrete was warm beneath his palms. The city noise felt closer here. Less filtered. What are you reading? Richard asked. Harrison held up the book. It was old. Dog-eared. A discarded medical manual, outdated but dense. The kind hospitals no longer used and libraries quietly sold off. Richard blinked. You understand this? Harrison looked at him as if that were an odd question. I understand patterns, he said. Words just explain them. Richard picked up another book from the stack. Anatomy. Physiology. Emergency response guides. Notes scribbled in the margins. Where did you get these? Richard asked. They throw them away, Harrison said. When newer ones come. And you read them, Richard said. Harrison nodded. When it rains. Or when it's too loud to sleep. Richard felt something tighten in his chest again, not medically this time. Why medicine? He asked. Harrison considered. Because people's bodies tell the truth, he said. Even when they don't. The word struck deeper than Harrison could know. Richard looked at the boy more carefully now. The way his fingers rested lightly on the page. The way he breathed evenly. The way he seemed unburdened by awe or fear. You helped me, Richard said. Why? Harrison shrugged. You were loud. Richard smiled despite himself. That's a first. Silence settled between them, comfortable and strange. Cars passed. A bus hissed to a stop nearby. Do you live around here? Richard asked. Harrison's eyes flicked away. Sometimes. Do you have family? Richard asked. Harrison hesitated. Not long. Just enough. My mom, he said. When she's working. Richard did not press. He had learned something about listening. You know what you did was dangerous, Richard said gently. Walking into a private event. Talking to people like me. Harrison met his gaze steadily. You know what you were doing was dangerous too, he said. Sitting through it. Richard laughed softly. This time, it didn't hurt. Fair, he said. Richard stood carefully. Come with me, he said. Harrison frowned. Where? To eat, Richard said. In daylight. In a place with chairs that don't try to kill you. Harrison considered the offer carefully. No deals, he said. No deals, Richard agreed. They ate at a small cafe nearby. Not fancy. Not hidden. Harrison watched everything, the server's posture, the way Richard cut his food, the people walking past the window. You still feel it, Harrison said quietly. Yes, Richard admitted. You should, Harrison said. It's not done with you. Richard paused. You speak like someone much older. Harrison shrugged. I listen more than I talk. Richard exhaled slowly. I want to help you, he said. Harrison stiffened slightly. I didn't ask. I know, Richard said. That's why I'm offering. Harrison studied him again, longer this time. Help doesn't usually come without strings. Then don't take it yet, Richard said. Just, consider it. Harrison nodded slowly. They parted without ceremony. But Richard did not return to his car right away. He stood on the sidewalk, leaning forward, breathing deliberately, watching Harrison disappear into the crowd. Something had shifted again. This time, outward. Over the next days, Richard arranged things quietly. Scholarships. Programs. Donations that didn't announce his name. He learned where Harrison slept when home wasn't an option. He learned which libraries discarded which books. He did not intervene yet. He waited. Then came the second incident. Richard felt it during a board meeting. Stronger than before. Sharper. A warning without subtlety. He leaned forward immediately, breathing slow. But it didn't ease. The room blurred slightly. Panic edged closer than it ever had. Richard stood. I need a minute, he said. But what he needed wasn't in the room. He left the building. And without telling himself why, he drove. To the library. Harrison was there. Same steps. Same posture. Same quiet focus. He looked up as Richard approached. It got louder, Harrison said. Yes, Richard replied. Harrison stood immediately. Sit, he said. Now. Richard obeyed. Harrison knelt in front of him, eyes sharp, hands hovering but never touching. You ignored part of it, Harrison said. I did everything the doctor said, Richard protested. Harrison shook his head. You did what they told you. Not what your body told you. He guided Richard's posture again. Adjusted his breathing rhythm with soft, precise instructions. Counted under his breath. The pressure receded slowly. Reluctantly. Richard closed his eyes. When he opened them, Harrison was watching him with an expression Richard hadn't seen before. Concern. You need help beyond me, Harrison said. Soon. I know, Richard said. And you need help beyond books. Harrison didn't deny it. The moment hung between them. Two lives moving toward an intersection neither had planned. And for the first time, Richard Robinson realized the story unfolding wasn't about being saved. It was about responsibility. Richard Robinson woke before dawn for the first time in decades without an alarm. No assistant. No schedule. No urgency manufactured by ambition. Just awareness. The pressure was still there, quiet now, like a reminder tapping from the inside. Not pain. Not fear. Presence. Harrison had been right. It wasn't done with him. It never had been. Richard sat on the edge of the bed and leaned forward instinctively, breathing the way a 9-year-old boy had taught him on concrete steps. That alone unsettled him. By mid-morning, Richard made a decision he had avoided his entire life. He went to a public hospital. No private wing. No announcements. No name on the door. He sat through tests, imaging, consultations that lasted longer than he liked. The diagnosis came with clarity this time: postural cardiovascular compression exacerbated by chronic stress and neglect. Manageable. Treatable. But only if he changed the structure of his life, not just his body. You've been outrunning your physiology, the doctor said carefully. Richard nodded. I know. By afternoon, Richard stood again on the steps of the library. Harrison was there. Same place. Different book. This time, Richard didn't speak first. He waited. You went, Harrison said without looking up. Yes, Richard replied. And? Harrison asked. They confirmed it, Richard said. And they confirmed something else. Harrison closed the book. That you don't listen unless you're forced. Richard smiled faintly. That I've been surviving instead of living. Harrison looked at him then. Really looked. The way a child looks when deciding whether an adult deserves honesty. You're changing, Harrison said. I'm trying, Richard replied. That's new for me. Harrison nodded once. Good. Because I can't do much more. Richard felt a weight settle in his chest again, but this time, it wasn't pressure. It was understanding. You were never supposed to, Richard said quietly. Silence stretched between them. Traffic hummed. Pages turned behind glass doors. Harrison, Richard said. Do you know how rare you are? Harrison frowned. I know how hungry I am sometimes. Richard swallowed. Come with me, Richard said. Harrison stiffened. I said no deals. No deal, Richard replied. A door. Harrison considered this. Doors usually close. Not this one, Richard said. I'll make sure. They drove not to a mansion, not to an office, but to a modest building near a university medical center. Inside were classrooms. Labs. Quiet halls filled with students who didn't know his name. Richard led Harrison to a small office where a woman waited, calm, sharp-eyed, unassuming. This is Dr. Elaine Morris, Richard said. She teaches physiology. Harrison looked around cautiously. Elaine crouched to Harrison's level. Richard tells me you're curious, she said. Harrison hesitated. Then nodded. I read what people throw away. Elaine smiled gently. That's how most breakthroughs start. Over the next weeks, Harrison's world expanded, not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. Books that weren't discarded. Meals that arrived regularly. A place to sleep where rain didn't decide his comfort. Richard didn't announce it. He didn't brand it. He didn't turn it into a foundation with his name carved into stone. He simply showed up. And in doing so, he changed too. He restructured his workdays. Fewer meetings. Standing desks. Movement. Listening. He resigned from boards that fed his ego but drained his body. The pressure faded gradually. Not because Harrison had cured him. But because Harrison had interrupted him. Months passed. Harrison learned words for things he already understood. Blood flow. Nerve compression. Stress response. He asked questions that made professors pause. Not because they were clever, but because they were precise. One afternoon, Harrison sat across from Richard in a sunlit courtyard. You didn't have to do this, Harrison said. I did, Richard replied. Harrison frowned. Why? Richard leaned forward slightly, breathing steady. Because someone once needed me, he said. And I chose something else. Harrison studied him. And this is you fixing it? No, Richard said honestly. This is me not repeating it. Harrison considered that. Then nodded. On Harrison's 10th birthday, there was no party. Just a book. A real one. New. Heavy. Human Anatomy and Physiology. Inside the cover, Richard had written. Pay attention. It saves lives. Harrison ran his fingers over the page. This is expensive, he said. Richard smiled. So are mistakes. Years later, long after the sit-out luncheon became a forgotten anecdote, Richard Robinson would sit on another open terrace, older now, quieter. His life looked smaller from the outside. But it felt larger from within. Across the courtyard below, Harrison, no longer barefoot, no longer small, walked with purpose, a stack of books under his arm, sunlight catching his face. Richard leaned forward. Breathed. And smiled. Because success, he finally understood, wasn't what you accumulated. It was who you stopped ignoring. If this story made you pause, even for a second, subscribe for more stories that challenge how we define success, purpose, and value. And ask yourself in the comments. Who did you almost ignore, that might change everything?